This week we're exploring the city of Pittsfield. Located in the center of Berkshire County, it is a former mill town and the county seat with a population of 43,927 people. What led to Pittsfield to look the way that it does today? And what there is to see and do in Berkshire County's largest city. I'm Gus, and let's see what's along the way. The area we now call Pittsfield today was first settled around 1752. In 1735, the Massachusetts General Court allowed for the creation of 3 new townships, which would later be formed into Coleraine, Charlemont, and Pittsfield. A year earlier, in 1734, Bostonian Colonel Jacob Wendell, alongside Philip Livingston of Albany and John Stoddard, formed a partnership after becoming aware of the land around the east branch of the Housatonic River. By 1738, Colonel Wendell obtained the rights to form a settlement on the Mohican-Pontusuc region from the General Court, and was able to purchase the lands from the Mohicans for a total of around 1,440 pounds. Colonel Wendell and his partners began selling the lots during the summer of 1741, but with the start of King George's War in 1744, alongside with native resistance in the area, settling was halted. By 1745, settling was resumed, but progressed slowly until 1752, when more settlers and improvements came to the area, as what was now known as the Pontusuc Plantation was still pretty forested, with settlements forming around the east branch of the Housatonic and its tributaries. The French and Indian War caused delays in development, as many settlers had to flee to neighboring towns until they were able to build their own fortifications. This did not cause settling to sour, as by 1760, more lots were sold, and just a year later, the settlement was formally named after William Pitt and incorporated into Berkshire County as the town of Pittsfield. Pittsfield contains one prominent river, the Housatonic River, which forms after the confluence of the southwestern, western, and eastern branches of the Housatonic. The Housatonic then travels around 150 miles south through Connecticut until draining into the Long Island Sound at the Atlantic Ocean. This river and its branches were crucial for the development of Pittsfield and the many towns along its path. Pittsfield is crossed by 5 major routes: US Route 7, 20, Massachusetts Route 8, 9, and 41. Pittsfield currently receives passenger rail traffic from Amtrak's Lakeshore Limited and the Berkshire Flyer since at least 1981 on the east and west rail line called the Berkshire Subdivision. This same line also receives freight rail traffic from CSX, which also runs a switching yard using part of the former Pittsfield and North Adams Railroad as storage. Pittsfield also receives freight rail traffic from the Housatonic Railroad, with joint operations with CSX at the switching yard. Part of the remainder of the Pittsfield and North Adams Railroad has now been converted into a rail trail, which goes all the way north to Adams. During the period of Pittsfield establishment, the main industry in the area was farming, with wheat and rye exported to Hudson to return with beef and dairy products. This was not for long, as mills started to pop up around the Housatonic River and Shakersbrook. These mills worked symbiotically with farmers. By the mid-1760s, new industries were arriving to Pittsfield, with a fulling mill already constructed and an iron forge. This did not last, as by the end of the century, most of this kind of industry was abandoned. By the end of the 18th century, Pittsfield was already developing faster than many other towns we've seen before, obtaining a post office in 1794, tanneries, a newspaper, waterworks, and the formation of a membership-only social library and the Berkshire Agricultural Society. With a population of just 2,261 people, this was just the first act for Pittsfield. By the 1800s, a general shift to the west was happening, towards more furrow land in New York or Ohio. This didn't impact Pittsfield much in terms of population, but allowed for the expansion of speculative industries in the area. One that quickly caught on was the production of wool and its byproducts. Thanks to the importation of merino sheep, at the beginning of the century, many woolen mills started to pop up across Pittsfield's rivers. In 1829, the Commonwealth formed a commission to investigate the feasibility to create a western railroad from Boston to Hudson and Albany. This caused a, quote, railroad agitation across the region, with railroads such as the West Stockbridge Railroad quickly forming soon after. Initially, it was thought that the railroad connecting from Boston to Hudson would run through Berkshire County's shire town of Lenox, but this was quickly changed in 1837 when it was announced that it was going to go through Pittsfield instead. At the start of 1841, the first passenger train arrived from West Stockbridge to Pittsfield. Later that same year, after the construction of the Western Railroad's bridge over the Connecticut River, the first train from Boston arrived that December 21st, with the following year receiving at least 2 passenger trains and 1 freight train daily. But this was not the end for the railroads. That same year, 1842, the Pittsfield and North Adams Railroad was formed and opened for rail traffic in 1846, while the Western Railroad created a switching yard in Pittsfield, allowing for more freight operations in the area. The opening of the railroads coincided with a large increase of population to Pittsfield. Initially with a population of 3,747 people, it quickly jumped to 5,872 people 10 years later in 1850. Similar increase would continue throughout the rest of the century. The mid-19th century brought the start of early modernization of Pittsfield. The water department, seeing the large increase of population, proposed the construction of an aqueduct to Ashley Lake. This aqueduct was quickly constructed by 1855, but this rush job had to be reassessed, as the aqueduct pipes were already leaking, and due to only being laid 4 feet underground, they were prone to the thermal cycling of the seasons. By the time the repairs were taken, in 1857, the town's water needs superseded what Ashley Lake could naturally replenish. This issue was not fully resolved until the end of the century. During the 1860s and 70s, many improvements were made to Pittsfield's infrastructure. The fire department experimented and then started to deploy gas street lighting in 1863, while the waterworks started to add street side drainage in 1867. The following year, Pittsfield became the shire town of Berkshire County, taking the crown away from Lenox. This brought even more development to Pittsfield, including county infrastructure, as by the 1870 census, Pittsfield population reached 11,112 people, an increase a bit over 2,000 people in just a decade. By the mid-1870s, the Berkshire Athenaeum formed with the intentions of providing a truly free public library. The town voted for the creation of a war monument at the park, while the water department started to replace the old lead and concrete pipes with iron. In 1879, a paper mill located east of Pittsfield was bought by the Crane Paper Co., which makes paper currency right to this day and is headquartered in Dalton. By the 1880s, Pittsfield's textile industry started to struggle, but at the same time, new industries started to arrive, with shoes becoming the second export behind textiles. Other notable industries include the Terry Clock Factory, Pittsfield Track Company, and the Kelly Steam Power Company. And by the end of the decade, 2 separate electric companies had formed, the Pittsfield Electric Light Company and the Pittsfield Illuminating Company. These 2 would then merge in 1890, creating the Pittsfield Electric Company and a subsidiary named Stanley Electric Manufacture Company, creating electric transformers. By 1890, the town, feeling better prepared, voted to become a city. By this time, this was more than overdue, as the traditional town meeting system had become a hindrance. With a population of 17,281 people, most venues could host at most 2,000 people packed together, becoming the largest settlement in Massachusetts with a town meeting system, hosting around 73 town meetings each year. This had to end, and in 1891, Pittsfield was re-established as the City of Pittsfield. The last decade of the 19th century in Pittsfield saw the shift towards the manufacture of finished products and the new industry of electric machinery and appliances. Though some industries still attempted the production of raw products, many other industries filled the gap made by this shift. As an increase of tourism and the formation of the leisure class in Pittsfield allowed for the formation of boating clubs, casinos, theaters, hotels, and banks. This allowed for the cultural expansion and notoriety of Pittsfield. Besides some constant issues with the roads and waterworks, it would seem that Pittsfield is ready to take the next century head on. The beginning of the 20th century saw a continued growth of both industry and population, with Pittsfield now reaching a population of 21,766 people in the 1900 census. In 1902, Pittsfield made national news when a speeding trolley, failing to stop, collided with President Theodore Roosevelt's motorcade on South Street, causing the first death of a Secret Service agent while on duty. But this was just a small blimp on the radar, as by 1905, development quickly picked up at Pittsfield's Morningside region, with notable investment from Eaton Crane and Pike and from General Electric of New York as part of their acquisition of the Stanley plant. This investment was substantial, substantial, as by 1912, GE employed around 1/6 of Pittsfield's population. The late 1900s and early 1910s saw the height of the pre-war entertainment and leisure in Pittsfield, with yearly balloon races, expansion of the Athenaeum now having a natural history museum and a moving picture theater, the Majestic, on North Street. By 1915, only 3.5 miles of the city's roads had been paved, even though the city had voted to pave them 12 years earlier. This made Pittsfield notorious for its horrible road conditions, as that same year, it had received around 90,000 visitors by automobile alone. But these concerns quickly faded, as World War I and the subsequent war effort came into full force. The war quickly brought disruption in trade, production, and commerce, but some of these were quickly alleviated as war production orders started to come in. Textile manufacturers such as the Pontusuk, Berkshire, and W.E. Tilson quickly increased production and wages to a total of a 20% increase by the end of the year. GE also expanded employment with 5,300 employees at the start of 1916 and ended that same year with 7,500 employees. But this all came crashing down once the war ended, with many workers at Pittsfield receiving a 22.5% cut in wages, or worse, unemployment, as many mills had to suspend operations as they reconfigured their operations or ultimately shuttered. By the mid-1920s, GE continued expanding, while also receiving larger orders for transformers to Japan and 1,000 electric fans for the former USS Leviathan. With 8 stock brokerage firms and a new Western Union office sporting a live stock ticker, it would seem that the good times are here to stay. And who could blame them? With Pittsfield's population now being 49,677 people by the 1930 census, city planners and consultants were already predicting 90,000 people by 1950. The start of the Great Depression, like many communities across the country, affected Pittsfield greatly. The Tillerton Mill closed, displacing 300 people from their jobs, while GE reduced working hours to avoid layoffs. The city was in a tough position, having to make paradoxical decisions such as heavily decreasing the Parks Department and teachers' budget, while also opening a much-needed high school in 1931 with about 1,500 students enrolled. By this time, the Pittsfield Electric Street Railway Company, now known as the Berkshire Street Railway, was in shambles, with few remaining streetcars still in operation, soon to be replaced by the modern bus, while the unlucky ones remained parked on the streets, laid there to rot for years until they were scrapped along with their tracks. By the next year, 1933, Pittsfield's Public Welfare Department became the biggest department in the city, with a budget of $1.5 million at the time, more than doubling the previous year's budget. By this time, the CCC had arrived to Pittsfield, slightly alleviating the unemployment problem with its improvements of the Pittsfield State Forest and other reforestation efforts, while the PWA worked on the construction of infrastructure such as a new police station on School Street. 1934 is considered to be the worst year for the Depression in Pittsfield, as by the next year, things seem to start to improve, with a slight increase of economic activity and wages. GE received contracts for Boulder Dam, while Eaton Crane Paper Co. resumed the hiring of workers for the first time since the start of the Depression. By the end of the decade, Pittsfield's population was 49,684 people in the 1940 census, an increase of just 7 from the previous decade, but now with a 25% unemployment rate. At the start of the 1940s, Pittsfield experienced a similar economic effect as it did during the Great War. With war production back on focus, mills such as the Berkshire Wyandotte produced uniforms. GE now was operating 24/7, building new facilities that focused on plastics and ordnance. By 1945, a fear was forming of a new economic depression happening once the wartime production ended, but in Pittsfield, the continuation of price controls and restrictions allowed for a somewhat smooth transition, though not for long. Tourism, especially from New Yorkers, saw a resurgence, with the snow trains back in service, and restrictions of vehicles and gas lifted, saw a persistent increase in traffic and lack of parking. By the 1950 census, Pittsfield's population had reached a new height of 53,348 people. The continual expansion of GE's operations in Pittsfield, coupled with the Korean War and Reconstruction, led to a stable period for many in Pittsfield. But that was not true for others, as the textile and paper mills were starting to experience more competition, not only nationwide, but also across the globe. Pittsfield then reached its century peak of population of 57,979 people in the 1960 census, then started to slowly decline, a downward trend that has continued right to this day. As we see in other towns, the 70s and 80s brought further challenges, but the world economy continued to provide Pittsfield with stable jobs throughout the Vietnam War. The recession and the oil crisis deepened the economic issues that led to the start of much change for Pittsfield. With passenger rail service discontinued in 1971, many businesses that rely on tourism, such as hotels and ski resorts, had to either decrease operations or close their doors. With a decrease in orders for transformers, many were being laid off by GE, with the biggest blow being the announcement in 1987 of the end of transformer production in Pittsfield. By 1990, GE then sold off the remaining defense manufacturer to Lockheed Martin, along with 2,650 employees, of which Lockheed only kept 1,900. This left the remaining 530 employees of the plastic division as one of the few only remnants of GE, the once largest employer in Pittsfield. Lockheed Martin then sold off the ordnance facilities to General Dynamics in 1997, which followed more layoffs, as General Dynamics changed the facility's focus from one of production of artillery to one of research and testing. It would seem that the era of industry in Pittsfield will soon be over. By the year 2000, manufacturing in Pittsfield had fallen behind healthcare and retail. The first quarter of the 21st century saw the removal of former GE structures in Pittsfield and their subsequent cleanup, as during the height of transformer production, polychlorinated biphenyls or PCBs were routinely discharged onto the Housatonic River, while also contaminating the soil. PCBs are a known carcinogen and endocrine disruptor. Though some areas have been cleaned up and released to the city, not much has been done with the downstream cleanup of the Housatonic, with preparations set to start in late 2025 or 2026. In 2007, GE left Pittsfield for good, selling its plastic division to Savic. The 2008 recession brought a rise of unemployment to the city, with almost 9% in 2010. By the 2020 census, Pittsfield's population was 43,927 people, a decrease of 810 from the previous decade. Pittsfield today appears as an active city, with constant traffic from its major routes. It is noticeable that Pittsfield has experienced some of the Rust Belt symptoms, but thanks to its delayed onset and its location as a hub in Berkshire County, has allowed for a somewhat smooth transition into white-collar jobs, if you don't look too closely, as Pittsfield has now solved issues with employment, with close to half of Pittsfield's population commuting out of town for their jobs, and having an unemployment rate that has stayed hovering around 7%. Pittsfield has invested on this commuting trend, constructing the Joseph Chelsea Intermodal Transportation Hub in 2004, becoming the center of many Berkshire Regional Transit Authority's bus lines and a stop for Amtrak's passenger lines. Pittsfield also receives many out-of-state visitors, either for work or for pleasure, as Pittsfield hosts many cultural events and many natural protected areas. One of them is Pittsfield State Forest, an 11,000-acre forest that hosts over 30 miles of trails in Massachusetts' highest natural body of water, Berry Pond, at an altitude of 2,150 feet. This forest, along with others in Berkshire County, are visited by many to experience the annual change of the leaves. Pittsfield's place in Berkshire County is one that echoes many other places we've visited before, but on a larger scale. A company town left by itself, but at the turn of the millennium. Though their future is still unknown, they have quickly focused on bringing new businesses and emphasizing not only its existing infrastructure, but also the innate beauty that lies in these hills, which are held in the hearts of many, lucky to have visited or live in Pittsfield. So what do you guys think? Do you live in Pittsfield or have ever visited? To me, it seems that Pittsfield is still dealing with the aftermath of GE's departure as a major employer. Though some action has been taken, such as focusing on tourism, it is too early to know what the future will hold for Pittsfield. Well, that's all I got for you today. I hope you have a good day, and I'll see you guys next time.